The idea of having publishers and subscribers is not a new idea. In fact, I'm sure you're all very familiar with subscribing to wonderful .NET channels hosted by incredibly handsome, charismatic individuals. But today we are not talking about begging for YouTube subscriptions. Today we are going to be talking about the publisher-subscriber model within the context of software engineering. And beyond that, we're actually going to be building our very own message broker application in .NET. Hello and welcome back. So yes, as I said in today's introduction, today we're going to be looking at the publisher-subscriber pattern. And beyond just looking at the theory, we're going to put it into practice and build our very own message broker application. So we've got a demo coming up in just a second, followed by the theory and then the main code build for the rest of today's video. So as always, code is available on GitHub. I will put a link to the repository in the description below. But other than that, what are we waiting for? Let's get started. So let's take a look at the applications we're going to build today as part of our focus on the publisher-subscriber model. And the first application we're going to build and focus on is this one here, the message broker. And this really lies at the heart of the publisher-subscriber model. It is responsible for taking messages from the publisher and propagating them down to our subscribers, which leads us nicely on to here, which is our subscriber app. This is the second app that we are going to build. It's a very simple application, and I just have two separate instances of it running here, just to kind of demonstrate the idea that you can have multiple subscribers listening to the same message. And in terms of our publisher, we're not writing any code for that today. I'm just going to be using the Insomnia API client to send messages to our broker. And just on that topic, you can probably guess by now that the broker is effectively a HTTP-based solution. That's the messaging that we're going to use, and it's effectively a web API. Now what you can see here within Insomnia is a request to publish a message to the broker, or more correctly, publish a message to a topic on the broker. And what we're going to do here is publish this message to topic number 2. And no surprises, both our subscribers are subscribed to that very topic. So let's get it up and running. So here's our broker running, and we will start up both of our subscribers. And as soon as we start our first subscriber, you'll see some HTTP traffic to our broker. It's basically using HTTP polling to get any new messages, and there aren't any at the moment. Likewise with subscriber 2. So both our subscribers are listening for messages being published to topic number 2. So I'll just bring Insomnia halfway onto the screen and click send, publishing a message to our broker. And what you should see here is messages propagating down to both of our subscribers. Now we'll delve into this in a lot more detail a bit later, but what you can probably guess is we're using a request acknowledge pattern. So we requested our messages, which we got, with the status of requested, and then we acknowledged the message back to the broker to say that we received it. And that does change the state of our message, but we'll cover all that a bit later. Another thing I'll quickly show you here is I can flood the message broker with messages, and it just accepts those messages. So it makes our publisher very efficient. It can just throw messages as fast as it likes to our broker. And as you kind of saw here, our subscribers ran at their own pace in order to receive those messages. Subscriber number 1, you can actually see received 4 messages, a block of 4, and then a block of 12. Whereas subscriber 2 ran at a slightly different cadence. It received 5 messages, as it could do at that point in time, and then it received a further 11. So again, a very important thing about subscribers listening for messages, they can run at their own pace. And the broker acts as this rather nice intermediary. The last thing I'll do as part of the demo is just to shut down subscriber 2, and we'll send some more messages onto the bus. And as you can see here, subscriber 1 received 7 messages, acknowledged 7 messages. Subscriber 2 is down. So what happened to the messages it's waiting for? We run up again. All is not lost. It too got its 7 messages that were waiting for it in the cache of the message broker. So hopefully that quick demo has whetted your appetite for building this code today and also looking a little deeper at the publisher subscriber pattern, which we'll do next. So before we start coding, let's just take a very quick look in a bit more detail at the publisher subscriber pattern. Although to be honest with you, I covered most of these points, I think, in the demo section, but let's just go through them anyway. So yes, not surprisingly, publisher subscriber pattern or pub sub pattern is used to publish events to multiple interested subscribers asynchronously. The publishers and subscribers are decoupled, so certainly the publisher is unaware of the subscribers that it may or may not have. It just emits events or publishes events to the event broker, the message broker, and it walks away and does not care who is listening. So very much a decoupled approach. This next point is really just grounding us in reality, and what I'm saying there is that if you want to adopt the publisher subscriber pattern in your own solutions, then it's highly recommended that you would adopt an existing solution that's already been built to support that pattern. So something like RabbitMQ or the Azure Service Bus or Kafka, and there's loads and loads more. We're going to roll our own today. We're going to build our own today. I would not recommend that you use what you build today, certainly not in its current form in a commercial production solution. I wouldn't probably do that. Fine to use it in your own little projects and stuff like that just to test out the concepts, but it is not a commercial production quality solution. I'm sure you knew that already, right? But I'm just calling it out. If you wanted to really adopt this pattern, don't build your own, go with an existing one, because really you don't want to reinvent the wheel when someone's already done the hard work for you. I just decided to build one today just because I wanted to, and it's a bit of fun. And hopefully it helps you learn about the pub sub pattern in a bit more detail. So yes, as it says there, we are going to roll our own today. So let's take a look at a bit of a diagram that explains the pattern in a bit more detail, although to be honest with you, it's pretty straightforward. So we start with our publisher, and our publisher puts messages or publishes messages onto an input channel, which belongs to the message broker. And the message broker takes those messages on the input channel and puts them onto an output channel that the subscribers can then receive those messages from. So we're basically building this out today. And then kind of really just to round off, we've got one more slide after this, but just thought it'd be worth talking about the benefits of using publisher subscriber. You know what it is now, but why would you use it? What's the point in using it? Well, there's a number of benefits. I've just pulled out the ones that I kind of like. First one there, improves the responsiveness of the publisher. So as you kind of saw in the demo, you can go quite crazy with just publishing messages. You're not relying on subscribers keeping up. The kind of converse side of that is that subscribers can perform better under load, and they can run at their own pace. And so if they're slowed down for some reason, it doesn't matter. The messages are kind of throttled within the message broker, and they can, as you saw, even if the subscriber goes down and has to recover, it can still receive messages that it may have originally missed when it was offline. You can even defer or schedule processing of events. There are also some potential integration benefits between connecting disparate systems using this pattern, okay? And then final point, allows for decoupling where it makes sense to do so. Now, if you want to learn more about the benefits, I've put a reference to the Microsoft article that talks about the publisher subscriber pattern there, and it lists out more benefits if you're interested in taking a look at that. I'll also put that in the description below. You can just link off to it. And then last slide before we move on with coding, just a bit of a mapping of our architecture onto the pub sub model that I have along the top there. I've just shown one subscriber, but again, please do bear in mind there could be multiple subscribers. So as you've already seen, we're going to use Insomnia as our publisher. For our message broker and the input and output channel, we are going to build that ourselves as follows. So we will create a C# web API application with a data store, and I've just chosen SQLite for our data store as it's just so easy and quick to set up. Maybe if you wanted to take this project and expand it out a bit and make it a bit more performant, you might want to use something like Redis there, but for our purposes, SQLite is fine. In terms of the concept of an input channel, we're going to use something called a topic. That is not a term that I've, pulled out the air. It's a term that's used certainly in Azure Service Bus. It's used in other message buses as well, I believe. So it's a very common concept within the message bus world. So we're going to have this concept of a topic that messages can be published to. And on the other side, for our output channel, I'm using this concept of a subscription. Okay, so the idea is that subscribers will create subscriptions to a given topic. So you might have one topic, let's say, but 20 subscribers to that topic. And of course, in terms of our subscriber, that's just going to be a very simple C# console application. So we'll just go through an example flow using this architecture, although you have already seen this as part of the demo, but let's just go through it anyway. So Insomnia, acting as our publisher, will publish a message for a given topic, okay? And the broker will determine at this point in time how many subscribers there are for that particular topic. In this case, we only have one subscriber, but let's say we had 10. What the message broker will do is determine what subscriptions are associated to that topic. So if there are 10 subscriptions, then it will create a message for each of those subscriptions and store it away in its cache, so it can actually serve those up as and when they are requested by the subscribers. And that's basically what this line's showing you here. Each of the subscribers will ask for the messages for their given subscription. And of course, they will be delivered down to the subscriber if there are any new messages. All right, so that is enough theory. I think now we get started with creating our message broker. All right, so let's get going and start building our message broker. So first thing, let's open a new instance of Visual Studio Code. And it always starts on my other screen, so let me just pull that over, maximize it, and control backtick to open a integrated terminal. And I'm going to change into my working directory. And in case you're wondering what this is, I just have the path to my working directory stored in an environment variable. It's a rather long path. Don't want to type that out in a video. So quick directory listing, here's my code folder, so we'll just change into that and I'll clear the screen, and this is where I want to create my application. Before we do that though, let's just do a .NET -- version just to get the version of the .NET SDK we're running. That's fine, I want to use version 6, and that would be the minimum version of the .NET framework I would suggest you use for this project build. If you want to run something later, that's fine as well. So we'll scaffold up our app now. So .NET, new, and again, I love this new autocomplete feature of PowerShell, but I'll read it out anyway. So it's .NET new, it's the web API template. We're going to be using the minimal API pattern, and then we'll just name our project Message Broker. So when you're happy with that, hit enter, quick directory listing, and we'll change into the Message Broker directory. Clear the screen as well. And we just want to open this up now. So code space dot space -r, and that will open the project in the same version of VS Code, recursively in VS Code. Click yes to this, and then come over to the program CS file, and you'll see all this kind of boilerplate code. I want to remove most of this as we don't need it at all. So follow along with me to delete this code. So lines 40 to 43, we don't need. Leave in line 38, we do need that. Let's get rid of lines 24 to 36. Don't need that. Lines 19 to 22, get rid of that. We'll leave in line 17. We'll take out lines 10 to 15 though. Line 8 we need to retain, but lines 3 through 6 we can get rid of. So it should leave you with 4 very simple lines of code. They don't do too much now, but that's all we need as the basis for our project. So Control S to save that off. Because we removed all the Swagger stuff, which is basically just API doc stuff, if we come into launch settings JSON, which is under the properties folder, I do want to remove a couple of lines from each of these profiles. So line 24 and 25, we'll get rid of those. And lines 15 and 16, we'll get rid of those as well. Okay, and again, don't forget to save. And then just in terms of scaffolding, the only other thing we need to do is just to add a couple of package references to our CS proj file. So bring up our command prompt again, so control backtick, and we'll just do a .NET add package. And the first one we want to add is actually Microsoft.entityframeworkcore.SQLite. And just make sure you put one L in rather than two. Okay, I almost put two in there for some reason. Excellent, and you can see that package reference was added up here. And then the second reference we want is design. Okay, so again, Microsoft.entityframeworkcore.design, and you can see that's been added to our item group. Now, just for housekeeping purposes, I'm just going to manually remove this reference to Swashbuckle, which really just supported the Swagger functionality that we removed, so we don't really need it, and I'd rather clean up any references that we just don't need. And don't forget to save the CS proj file. Excellent, so that's basically our very basic scaffolding done. In the next section, we'll move on to creating our models. So just before we get going with creating our models, let's take a quick look at the underlying schema that we're going to actually create. And the first model we're going to create, which will result in a table in our SQLite database, is the topic model. And it couldn't really be much more simple. We have a mandatory primary key to identify it, and then just the name of the topic. Next model is our subscription model. It's not much more complex. It's exactly the same as topic, this time modeling subscriptions, but you do see there that we have a topic ID, and that means each subscription has to have a topic associated to it. So you can have multiple subscriptions all subscribing to the same topic or different topics. We're not going to be creating relationships in Entity Framework. This is just really a loose association, really just showing you that the primary key to foreign key relationship there, but we're not going to actually work with relationships today. And then the last model is the messages model. Now this is the one I probably spent most time thinking about. There's a number of ways you could structure this, but I landed on this approach here as it's basically the simplest approach in my view. So top to bottom, we have a primary key ID, we have an expiration date for the message. So this is not something we are really employing today, but the idea would be that we have these messages waiting to be picked up by a subscriber. What happens if a subscriber never asks for that message? You would want to clear out those messages after a while, and that's what the expiration date is. Again, we're not using it today, I just put it in to illustrate the point. We then have the actual topic message, which will contain the JSON object that will have our event messaging. We then have message status, which we will use for this concept of requesting and acknowledging messages. And then finally, we have a subscription ID. And the thing that might jump out at you there is, why have we got a subscription ID and not a topic ID? Well, that's a great question. The reason we have a subscription ID is because we will actually create one message per subscription. So let's say we have one topic and we have 3 subscriptions all subscribed into it. We are going to create one message for each subscription, and that's why we use the subscription ID. And our broker will actually create those 3 messages upon the receipt of our publishing request. So we'll actually look at the topic that the message is for, and it will then look at all the subscriptions for that topic and create one message per topic. And the reason I'm doing that is because we may need to deliver those messages to the subscribers at different times, or maybe certain subscribers, going back to our conversation on expiration dates, some subscribers may never come online, and we will eventually, in that case, we would probably want to expire that message. But the point is, we will have one message per subscriber. And again, there's a kind of loose relationship between the subscription and the messages there. And then just very quickly to talk about message state, it's probably worth just covering this here before we start coding. When we create a new message, it will have the status of new. When a subscriber then requests its messages, it will then put those messages into the state of requested. And then once the subscriber has received that payload and is happy that it's got it, it will respond back to the message broker and as a result, the state will be changed to sent. Okay, so we've got 3 statuses: new, requested, and sent. And what that means is any messages in the sent state will not be delivered back down to any subscribers. So when the subscriber asks for more messages, we will get new ones, and I'm also going to deliver requested ones as well, just in case the subscriber, for whatever reason, didn't get those. Okay, so we'll re-deliver the requested ones back, and we will not obviously deliver any sent messages because we've had an acknowledgement from the subscriber. All right, cool. So that's our kind of overview of our schema. Let's now actually get started with coding up our models. All right, so back over in our Message Broker app, let's create a new folder for our models. So right-click, new folder, models, and the first model we're going to create is for our topic. So right-click, new file, and we'll call that topic.cs. And as you saw from the schema overview, it's super simple. Anyway, namespace, and it's message broker.models, curly brackets, and it's just a public class called topic. And it's got 2 properties, so prop, tab. First one is an integer, just called ID. And I'm going to decorate that with the fact that it is a key. Technically, we don't really need to do this, but I just like to do it. I think it makes the code more readable. As you can see there, sorry, I'll just take a step back. I've put key in square brackets. It's giving us a kind of unknown error. Just place your cursor in there, control and period, and you'll get the quick fixes. So we just want to include this namespace up here. And then just one more property, so prop, tab. This time it's a string. I want to make it nullable, so I'm just going to put a question mark there, tab over, and I'm just going to call that name. Okay, and escape out of that, and I'm just going to say that this is required, like so. All right, super simple. We'll save that off. Next one is our subscription, so right-click models, new file, subscription.cs. I'll just make sure I've spelt that one correctly. Subscription, yeah. Namespace, message broker models. Don't need to type it this time. I'll type it out in full anyway. Again, it's a public class called subscription, curly brackets, prop. First one is an integer. It's just an ID. That's cool. I will decorate it again with key, and we'll pull in that namespace, so control period to bring in system component model data annotations. Next property is a string. We'll say it can be nullable, and we'll just call that name as well. And that too is required. And then finally, we will create our third and final property on the subscription. So prop, once again, is an integer, and we're going to call that topic ID. Okay, and again, that's just a reference back to our topic. And I will say that that is too required. Okay, fantastic. So we'll save that off. And then our third and final model is just our message model. So right-click models, new file, message.cs. And we'll just define that exactly as we've done the other two. So namespace is message broker.models. It's just a public class called message, and it's going to put in the broker for us, which I don't want, so make sure you call it message. And then we'll just define our properties as before. So the first one is an integer, it's our ID, and we'll decorate that with key as well. Bring in the namespace. Next prop, we'll make that string, and we'll call that topic message. And we'll make that required as well. Next prop, it's going to be an integer, it's going to be our subscription ID. And then the next prop is going to be our date time. This is going to be your expires after attribute or property. So e expires after. We'll make it required. And we will actually set it to a value of date time now. And then we'll add days to now. We'll add 1 day. So basically we're saying if we were going to do anything with this date time, we'll expire it after a day. But again, we're not really doing that. And then the last property is a string. And that's just our message status. And we'll set that equal to new to begin with. Okay, so all messages are created as new, and we'll say that is also required. And apologies, that's gone off the screen a little bit. So that's it, that's our message model done. Make sure you save that off as you save all the other models as well. We'll maybe take a quick pause there before we move on to doing our DB context and our data migrations. But yeah, we'll do that next. So now we want to create our DB context, which is basically going to mediate our models down to our database, in this case SQLite. So right-click new folder in the root of our project, and we'll call that data. And in our data folder, right-click new file, and we'll create a file called appdbcontext.cs. Namespace as before, message broker, data this time. And it's just a public class called appdbcontext. And we're going to be using the DBContext base class. Just fix up that O, and we'll pull in the namespace using Microsoft Entity Framework Core, like so. Fantastic. So we do want to create a placeholder constructor, so CTOR tab. And as the parameters, we're just going to pass in DB context options of type app DB context. And we'll just call that options. And over here, we'll specify base and options like that. Cool. Don't need to do anything more with that. But what we do need to do just to finish off our context is to define our DB sets. And we have one DB set per model that we want to migrate down to our data layer, so our database. So not partial, public. And the first DB set is going to be of type topic. And we'll call that topics, pluralize it, and that's what the table will appear as in SQLite. And we'll just say set that to type topic. And it doesn't know what topics are yet, so that's why we're getting some issues here. So we'll resolve that in just a second. Round brackets, semicolon. So yeah, let's bring in the namespaces for our models. So control period to bring in message broker models. All right, and actually get rid of our errors there. So you can probably guess we've got 2 more DB sets to go. So public DB set of type subscription, and it should pick that up for us, and we'll pluralize it, subscriptions. It helps us out with that as well, actually, and we'll just set that to subscription, like that. Perfect. And then last one, DB set message, and we'll call that messages, and we'll set it to message. Perfect, so save that off. Shouldn't have any errors. In fact, it's probably a good time just to do a .NET build, just to make sure we don't have any lingering errors. So .NET build. I'm confident everything will be okay. Indeed it is, that's cool. So our DB context is looking pretty good. Next, we want to come over to our program CS file, and we want to register that DB context for dependency injection. So after line 1, take a couple of new lines, make use of the builder, access our services, and we're just going to add DB context of type app DB context. And it won't know what that is, so let's do a control period to bring in the message broker data namespace. and then we'll just provide some options. So OPT goes to OPT, and we're going to use SQLite. It probably won't know what that is and doesn't in fact, but before we pull in the namespace for that, let's just pass in the connection string, and I'm just going to put it straight in here. You'd usually have your connection strings to your data sources in config somewhere, but because we're just using SQLite and there's no passwords or anything, it's very straightforward. I'm just going to do it like this directly in here, hard code a string, which again, you should never really do. So this is just the connection string format for SQLite. You just basically specify the name of the database that you want. I've just called it message bus. In fact, let's call it message broker to keep it consistent. I'll put a semicolon at the end there. But it doesn't know what SQLite is, so cursor in there, control period to bring in Microsoft Entity Framework Core. All right, let me just make that a little bit bigger so you can see the whole line. So we're now ready to actually create some migrations and then run those migrations, which should end up creating a database for us with the tables that reference these models. So the way we do that is to first generate a migration. So .NET EF, migrations, add, and then you give your migration a name. I'm just going to call it initial migration. Okay, so .NET EF migrations add initial migration. Now, if you get an error saying it doesn't know what EF is, you will need to install the Entity Framework Core tools. I'll put a link down below in the description that shows you how to run a command line prompt to do that. It's very straightforward. All right, so let's run that, and everything being equal, what that will do is it will generate some migrations for us. Indeed it does. So you can see up here we have this migrations folder, and in here we have a few things. If I just expand over, this is the thing we should be looking at, this first file or last file depending on your viewpoint. And you can see here we have a number of create table SQL statements effectively. Well, they become SQL statements that will create the 3 tables in our SQLite database. We don't have our database yet, we need to run these migrations. Now actually, just before we move on, it's probably quite good I got this warning here. Basically the version of the EF toolset that I was using, so .NET EF, this EF toolset, is slightly out of date. So it still worked, it's still okay, but it's suggesting that I update it. So I'm actually going to do that now, and the way you do that is very similar to the way you actually install the toolset. So it's just .NET tool, it's actually auto-completing it for me there, so .NET tool update -- global .NET -EF. Okay, so that's to update. If you wanted to install it for new, if you get some kind of error and it doesn't even know what it is, then you just type install here. Okay, but I'm not going to do that, I already have it, so I just update it, and that will go away and update the .NET EF toolset like that. Okay, so I've gone from 703 to 704. Didn't have to do it, but I don't like warnings. Don't know about you, I don't like them lingering around. All right, fantastic. So we have our migrations. We haven't run the migrations yet, so let's do that now. So .NET EF database space update. Okay, so we created our migrations. We're now going to run our migrations using this command here. Enter, and we should probably see like a database file being created down here. Maybe we have to run our application first. I thought oh, it is there. I didn't see it. Okay, messagebroker.db, it did appear. I think I might need glasses. Yeah, so there's our database being created as part of our migration run. Excellent. So just before we move on with creating our endpoints to allow us to manage our message broker and also publish and subscribe to messages, I want to just quickly show you this tool here. It's called DBeaver. I'm using the community edition, so it's basically free. And it's just a universal database management tool. You may have already used it. I think I've used it in 1 or 2 of my videos before. I can't recommend it highly enough. And I'm going to use it today just to connect into our SQLite database and have a poke around and have, look at the data that's coming through and all that kind of stuff. It's awesome. You can use it to connect a whole number of different database types, even SQL Server. But today we're using SQLite, so I'm just going to connect into that. So you just select whichever database you want. I'm going to just browse to the path that I want. So I'll come back here into Message Broker and select the database file, this one here. We'll open that up. You can test the connection. I imagine there'll be no issue, and then we'll just finish. And if we expand this now, we can have a look at the tables that we have. So we have 4 tables here. We have this one that's created by Entity Framework, which is basically just the, as the name would suggest, the migrations history. And then we just have our models here represented as tables, okay? And we can run SQL queries on that and stuff, which I might do later just to check that everything's working as is. But again, I just thought I'd show you that. I am going to be using that tool throughout the rest of the video. And you know, if you haven't done so already, you can get it from the Microsoft Store or just download it directly from DBeaver themselves. I'll put a link in the description and you can go and check it out. It is a really great tool. All right, so yeah, quick pause here and then we'll move on and we'll start creating our endpoints in our message broker. So let's just take a quick look at the endpoints we're going to be building out today. We'll run through this relatively quickly as we're going to be covering it in a bit more detail when we actually get to coding, but let's just give a bit of context to what we're doing. So the first endpoint there just allows us to create a new topic. It's a post request. Second endpoint there allows us just to retrieve all the topics that are configured on the message bus. Third allows us to actually publish a message to a topic. So this is the one that would be used by our publisher. In this case, it'll be Insomnia acting as our publisher. And then the last 3 relate to subscriptions, the first one of which just allows us to create a new subscription for a given topic. So again, that's an operation that would be performed ideally by our subscriber. Now we're just going to do that manually using Insomnia. We're not building that in to our little subscriber client. It's just going to be a bit of manual setup. But these next 2, the final 2 subscription calls, are going to be built in to our little subscription app. And the second one there is a GET request that just allows the subscriber to get all new messages for the subscription that it's created, okay? And then the last endpoint there just allows the subscriber to acknowledge those new messages that it's received, okay? So we'll just say, yep, I got those. Here are the IDs of those messages that I received successfully, and that will pivot the status of those messages to sent, okay? So that's our endpoints. Let's start coding. So back over in our program CS file, I just want you to take a new line after line 10 here, the use HTTPS redirection directive, but before app run. And we're just going to now start to write out our endpoint. So let's get cracking with our first 2. And the first one we'll do is the create topic endpoint. And the second one we'll do is the return all topics. Okay, and that just gets us up and running, gets us started. So what are we waiting for? Let's use our app object, we'll map post. And the first thing we need to supply to map post is the route portion of our URL. So API topics, I think makes sense for me, comma, and then it's just an asynchronous method. And into that, we're going to pass an app DB context, as we're going to be making use of our context to add a model. Okay, and we'll just call that context like that. And the other thing we're going to pass in is actually a topic model. And we'll just call that topic. Okay, and there's a few red lines going on here. Let's just finish off the method kind of definition. So it goes to curly brackets, and we'll put a semicolon in here. So yeah, it doesn't know what appdb context is. And I think that's because I've spelled that incorrectly. Context, that should sort that one out. It does indeed, but it doesn't know what topic is because we don't have that namespace. So let's just pull our namespace in for our models. That should resolve that. Now, just a word on the topic model that we're passing over. I wouldn't usually recommend you use the model. I'd recommend you use a DTO, a data transfer object, to represent the model. But in the interest of time, we're just going to go with the raw model. All right. And if you're interested in DTOs and stuff like that, I've done lots of videos on DTOs. There's actually a module over on lesjackson.net that covers DTOs, but I've also done it here on YouTube. So for example, the minimal API tutorial that I've done goes over it all as well. All right, cool. So the body of our map post, our create topic endpoint, is pretty simple, to be honest with you. As it's an asynchronous method, we'll use the await keyword on our context. We'll access our topics DB set, remember, all the topics, and then we are just going to add async. If I find the right one, so add async, that's the one. And what we're going to add, we're just going to add our topic. Okay, so you can see here, I'm not checking to see whether topic's valid or anything. Probably should do, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to do this. Doing that is not enough to actually add the topic to our database. In order to flush it down to the database, we actually have to do this next step, which is awaiting on our context again. And this time, we're just going to save changes async, like that. This step is needed if you want to actually make your changes permanent to the database. And then last, we just want to return a 201 created result. So we'll say return, use the results object, we'll use created. And then into this, we need to pass the route of the resource that we've just created as per kind of fairly standard REST paradigm rules. I'm going to use string interpolation. So the route is API/topic, topics, plural, / and then string interpolation, we're going to pull out the, not the ID directly, we're going to use the topic model and we'll pull out the ID. Okay, so that's going to give us the route to our resource. And then we're going to pass over the entire resource as well, topic, like that. Okay. Excellent, so save that. We could test this now, but before we do that, I want to do the second endpoint because it will actually work well together. We can create one and then return one. So this next endpoint is super simple. It's much more simple than the one above. So it's just a map get. It's a get request this time. Again, we need to specify the route. It's exactly the same route actually as the one above, just a different verb. It too is asynchronous, and it too requires an appdb context as we're reading from our database like that, but we're not passing in any other parameters. Pretty straightforward stuff. Okay, so we'll create a variable called topics and we'll make that equal to our context and our topics, and we'll say toList async. Okay, now this topics variable could legitimately be null, that's okay. You just get an empty set back when we return it back. So let's do that now, return results. We'll just return a 200, so okay, and then we'll pass in topics like this. Okay, so again, this might contain stuff, it might not, it doesn't matter, it's all good. And this is going to complain, I think, because I'm not using a wait here, so let's just put that in like that. That's better, gets rid of that warning. Cool. All right, so save that off again. That's all. We can still get a few endpoints to go, but that's the two topic ones that I wanted to focus on in this section done. Let's test it out. So let's do a .NET run, and that will do a build as well, make sure we've not introduced any errors. Looking good. Let me just move this up a little bit, and you can see that it is running on two endpoints, HTTPS and HTTP. So I'm just going to copy the HTTPS one. So if I just pull Insomnia onto the screen here, again, we are going to use Insomnia to test all our API endpoints, and it's also going to be used as our publisher as well. So let's test out our topic creation endpoint first of all. So over here, new request, it's going to be a post request. If I just paste in the server name there and then complete the route to API topics, like so. I'll rename this as well to make it something a bit more meaningful. So create topic, like that. And then we just need to pass over a body. So the body is going to be JSON. And if I just move this off to the side again and come back to our topic model, which is what we're expecting to pass over, we don't need to pass over the ID. SQLite takes care of that for us, but we do need to pass over the name of our topic. So let's just specify that in here as name. And what we're going to call our topic, well, a topic, as the name kind of suggests, is something that subscribers might be interested in. Okay, so for today's video, let's think we are running some kind of e-commerce enterprise, and so we've got various different systems like finance systems, product management systems, shipment logistical systems that would all be interested in various events. And so let's focus on orders being placed. So there's maybe going to be a topic called orders that different subscribers would be interested in what's happening with orders within our organization. So I'm just going to call this topic orders, like so. I'll click send to create an order topic. We get our 201 response, which is looking good, and here's the actual object itself. If we took a look at the response headers, you can see this location here is the route to that resource as well. Okay, so if we come back to here where we specified our endpoint, that's basically the location, and this is basically the object that was returned. So that's looking pretty good. Let's just duplicate this. We'll say return topics, like so. And we'll just change this to a GET request. The URL is exactly the same. We don't want to pass a body, so that's just gone off the screen here. There is actually another option here. This is just running at very high magnification, so you'll have to excuse me. There was an option there. I don't know if you'll see it now. Yeah, no body. Okay, so I just selected no body, okay, to get rid of that. And we'll send that over, and that should just return back our orders topic like that. So we could create another topic like, I don't know, shipments or something. I'm just thinking of these off the top of my head. So if you've got better ideas for topic names, you go for it. And we'll send that over. We get a shipments topic, and if we return, we get our 2 shipments. Okay, so fairly straightforward, standard stuff. So we'll maybe take a quick pause there, and in the next section, we'll do our next endpoint, which is actually to publish a message onto our topic, but we'll do that next. All right, so back over in our project, we are going to add a third endpoint now, which is going to allow us to publish messages onto our message broker for a given topic. So I'm just going to come out of the server. I'm going to get rid of that by doing Control backtick, and we're in our program CS file, so I'm going to do Control B to give us a bit more room. And yes, just after our last endpoint, let's add in our publish message endpoint. So as before, it's an app map post request, and the route to this endpoint again is going to be API/topics, as we're adding a message to the topic, and we want to provide the ID of that topic. And I'm also going to specify this here as part of the route messages. Okay, so we want to really add a message to this topic. That's what that's trying to say anyway. It's an asynchronous method, so async, okay, and into that, as before, passing an app DB context using dependency injection. Now, if I've not mentioned this in today's talk, if you're a bit confused about dependency injection and wondering where this context comes from, check out my free module on lesjackson.net that takes you through dependency injection. I'll put a link somewhere on screen and even in the description below. But if you're all cool with that, then let's keep going. So yeah, our app.db context, we're going to expect that. We're also going to expect an integer of ID, which is basically just our topic ID. We will want to make use of that in just a bit. And then finally, we're going to expect a message model, and we'll just call that message. All right. Now, as before, I would suggest that you would typically use a DTO here for message rather than using the raw model, but for our purposes, this is fine. Just going to terminate that with a semicolon. Now, first thing we're going to check is that in this URL, we're passing over the topic ID that we want to publish to. Now, if that topic ID is non-existent, i.e. we don't have any topics, then I don't want to create a message. So that's the first thing we're going to do here. So I'm going to create a Boolean value. I'm going to call it topics, and I'm going to make that equal to awaiting on our context on our topics DB set, and then I'm going to use the any async method to see whether we have any topics with that particular topic ID. So I'll say T goes to T ID, equivalent to the ID that's passed in. Okay, and so this will be true if there's any topic in our table. That's cool, that'll be true, otherwise it will be false, obviously. So assuming it's false, I do not want to do anything else, I just want to return back with a 404 error. So we'll say if not topics, then we're just going to return results not found. And I might just put a little bit of raw text in here and say something along the lines of topic not found. I don't know what that word is supposed to be. It's supposed to be topic, obviously, but it was nowhere close, was it? Okay, so that's cool. So if the topic ID is an invalid one, then we'll return a 404. Next clause I want to do, and this is maybe a little more controversial, is if there are no subscriptions on that topic, I want to back off and go, look, there's nobody subscribed to this topic. I'm not even going to add a message into our broker. You may want to change that behavior. You may want to say, well, look, there might not be any subscriptions, but we do have some topics. So, hey, I still want to publish messages onto that topic. And okay, if nobody comes and picks them up after a day, then we can purge them. So you might want to change this behavior. I just thought, for the purposes of today, I don't even want to go there and add messages where there are no subscriptions. So that's the way I'm doing it today. So the way I'm going to do that is by declaring a variable. We'll just call it subs, and we'll make that equal to the context on our subscriptions. So checking out our subscriptions, and we'll do a where. And we'll simply say subscription goes to subscription where the topic ID for our given subscription equals the ID that was passed in, the topic ID that was passed in, okay? And so this subs variable could contain 0 to many subscription objects, okay? So assuming we have something there, or maybe we don't, we want to check that out. So we want to say if subs, and we'll use the count method, is equivalent to 0, so we don't have any subscriptions, then we just want to return back as well. So we'll say return results, and we'll just say not found again. And this time we'll say something along the lines of there are no subscriptions for this topic. No subscription. Okay, I can't believe I spelled that correctly. It looks correct anyway. It may occur to me later that it's not, there's some spelling mistakes there, but it looks good to me at the moment. Okay, cool. So assuming we pass these two clauses, then yeah, we have some subscriptions for that topic. So let's now add the messages to our queue or to our broker. So we'll say for each, and we'll declare a new variable. We'll call it sub. In the collection of subscriptions, we're going to create a new model, message model. So message MSG equals new message, and then we'll just populate some values for it as follows. So we'll say the topic message is just going to be equal to the topic message in our message object. Okay. Next, we'll say the subscription ID. Now I need to put a comma in here. Okay, cool. And then next we will say our subscription ID. So subscription ID for our message equals the sub ID. Okay. And then we'll say expires after equals message expires after. And then finally we'll say message status equals message status. So really you can see that for 4 of these properties, topic message, expires after, and message status, even if we have 10 messages being added, 1 for each subscription, they're going to have the same value. The only value that really changes for each of our unique messages is the subscription ID. Okay, so again, if you have 5 subscriptions for a topic, we're going to add 5 messages. Cool. Now let's not forget that we need to add these messages to our database. So we'll say context messages, add async, and we'll add the message like that. Okay, and then once we exit our for each loop, we will then save off all of those changes. So again, we'll wait on our context and we'll say save changes async, and that will save the multiple changes down to our database. And then finally, we do want to return back. So I'm just going to say return results. And this time I'm just going to pass back a simple OK, just saying messages have been added, or message has been added. Okay, so from the perspective of the publisher, it's just adding one message, it's just publishing a message, and then obviously within the broker we then create multiple messages if required. Maybe we do only create one, but we could create multiple. But as far as the publisher is concerned, we're just publishing a message. Okay, so message has been added, or maybe we say message has been published, just to keep our language consistent. Otherwise it might, get a little bit confusing. Okay, and again, just up here, when we added our topic, we return back a 201 using this created method. Here, I'm just returning a flat OK. So let's save that off. Now, we can test this, but we can only really test the first two clauses. We can test this one here, where we pass in an incorrect topic ID, and we can test this second one here, where there are no subscriptions, because both of our topics have no subscriptions. We cannot quite test the adding of messages to our, I was going to say backlog, but to our message broker. We'll have to wait until the next section for us to create subscriptions before we can do that. But let's give that a go anyway. So let's do a .NET run to run this up. And while that's starting, I'll just bring Insomnia back onto the screen, like so. And I'm going to duplicate this create topic endpoint, and I'm just going to say publish message. Okay, like so. And up here for publish message, it's the same route, but this time we're going to pass through the ID of a topic. So let's pass through one that we know is not there. So we'll say 8, and don't forget to put in messages, otherwise it won't hit that endpoint. Actually, let's just come back to return topics. Make that full screen, and I'm going to send this over. Yep, so we only have 2 topics, so 3 and 4. So yep, using a 8 here is definitely okay. I might just make this a little, I was trying to make this a little bit smaller, but this is as small as it will go. Cool, so we're going to hit this endpoint. We're going to create a new message. That's cool. Let me just come back to the code just to see. I'll do a Control B to look at our message. So we do not need to pass over an ID. We will pass over a topic message. We don't need to pass over a subscription ID because we add that ID when we iterate through our subscriptions collection. So we don't need to pass that. Expires after we set automatically, and the status we set automatically. So that's cool. So all we need to actually pass over is the topic message. So let me just bring Insomnia back onto the screen. So it's just a topic message we want to send over. So we'll say topic message, and you could put some JSON text in here. I'm just going to say something like order created. I might put an ID in, so order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 created. Okay, so past tense event sort of terminology. So this should give us a 404. 404 not found, topic not found. That's perfect. And if we put in a valid topic, so there is a topic there. We'll get a 404 again because there are no subscriptions on this topic. Okay, so that's looking like it's working as I would expect it. All right, so we'll maybe take a quick pause here. In the next section, we'll start working on our subscription endpoints, but we'll do that next. All right, so back over in our message broker application, we're going to add a new endpoint, and this endpoint is going to allow us to create a new subscription. So I'm going to kill my running server, get rid of my command prompt, Control B to get rid of our navigator bar. All right, now we're going to follow a similar kind of routing pattern to this message publish endpoint here, where we're going to describe a post endpoint that is basically hanging off of our topics. Okay, so we're going to again use this kind of format here. We're not going to route to messages though, we're going to route to subscriptions this time. So I'm going to copy this like this, and I'm going to come down here, we'll give a comment and we'll say create subscription. Paste that in like this, and rather than messages, it's going to be subscriptions, and it's going to be an async method where we expect an app DB context called context. We're also going to expect an integer called ID, which is the topic ID that we're looking for, or looking to add the subscription on. And then finally, we're going to expect a subscription model. I'm just going to call it sub because I'm sick of typing subscription. Okay, keep getting it wrong. All right, we'll take a new line and we'll fill out the body of our method. Now, like we did up here, we want to make sure that we're not attempting to add a subscription for a topic that doesn't exist. So I'm just going to completely copy this code because we want to do exactly the same thing here. And I'm just going to paste that in like that. Okay, now assuming we do have a valid topic, that's okay. We just need to add a subscription. We don't need to do any other checking. Now, as we're actually passing the topic ID in our URL, if we just come back and look at our message, at our subscription object, thinking forward to when we're going to make this API call and what we are expecting to pass over, we don't need to pass over the ID. We do, of course, need to pass the name. Now, we could pass the topic ID in the JSON body if we wanted, but to be honest with you, that would be doubling up because we're already providing the topic ID in the URL. So when it comes to actually calling this API, all I'm going to provide is the name of the subscription that we want. All right, so back over here, with that in mind, we are going to expect a subscription object, but the subscription object is not going to contain any value for the topic ID. So I'm just going to add that in here by saying sub topic ID equals ID, okay? And that's safe to do because we've already checked upstairs that we have a valid topic ID. And then after that, it's pretty straightforward. You've seen this before. We're just going to await on our context, on our subscriptions, and we're just going to add async, and we're just going to add our sub like that, okay? And then await on our context, and we're just going to save changes async to flush down the changes. And then finally, we do want to return a 201 to say that the subscription has been created. So we'll return results created. And we will use string interpolation here. So we'll say API / topics / and then we'll just put the ID of the topic / sub. I might actually just copy this because I'm so paranoid I'm going to spell it wrong, so I'm just going to copy that. I know that's terrible, but I'm sure you forgive me. And then we want to pass over the subscription ID, which would be sub ID, like that. And then finally we want to pass back the whole subscription object as well. And I think, yeah. Didn't capitalize the I. Okay, so that's looking pretty good to me. So let's save that off and let's give it a whirl. So control backtick, .NET run. Awesome. And let's pull over Insomnia back onto the screen like so. I'll maximize that and I'm going to duplicate publish message and we'll call it create subscription. Like so. And the route is going to be pretty much the same, but rather than messages, it's subscriptions. Let's check it out or test it out by passing over an ID that we know we don't have. But before we do that, I am going to reshape our payload, and it's just name, the name of our subscription. So what I will say is finance system. Okay, so the idea is we have a financial department within our organization. They're going to be interested theoretically in orders being created. And so their subscription is for their finance system. So let's give this a go. You get a 404 not found, which is excellent. And let's just refresh ourselves of the topics that we have. So we've got shipments and orders. So let's say the finance team are interested in the orders topic. So create subscription and we will put 3 in there, I'll send that over, and we get 201 created. So there we go, we have our finance system with a topic ID of 3. Let's just create another one for, let's say, the warehouse team have system that are interested in, you know, prepping orders for shipment. I can spell warehouse correct, that would be awesome. We'll send that over, and again, we have warehouse system. So what that then means is if we come back to publish message and we are going to publish a message onto our topic number 3, then we should get a 200 response. Indeed we do, the message has been published, so that's looking pretty good. Now what we can do at this point in time, although we're going to come on and write an endpoint to do this, is I'm going to bring DBeaver back onto the screen. Remember from a few sections ago, and if we kill that, I'll just right click on the database, we'll do SQL editor, and actually I'll just make sure, yeah, that was the one we connected to, wasn't it? So new SQL script, I can write the select statement, so select everything from messages, and we'll just run that, you can see we actually have our 2 messages that have been created. And you can see here that both the same topic message, order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but the subscription IDs are different. And we have a status of new for each of these messages. And they're just sitting there in our message broker, waiting for our subscriptions or subscribers to come along and pull them down. So do you know what? That's exactly what we're going to do in the next section. All right, so let's just get rid of DBeaver. I'm going to close this down. I'm going to get rid of it, and I'm going to make sure I'm in my program CS file and get rid of a sidebar like that. So yeah, we're going to create our penultimate or second last endpoint, and that is the endpoint that's going to allow our subscriber to pull down its messages. So quick comment, get sub subscriber messages. App again. This time it's a map get. We're just reading messages. And the route that we're going to use is going to be API/subscriptions this time, with the ID of the subscription that we want to retrieve messages for. And I'm just going to / that with messages, okay, just so we're very clear on the type of resource that we really actually want from our subscriptions endpoint. Make this an async method where we are passing over an appdb context, call context, and we're also expecting an integer of ID, which is just our subscription ID. And I'll take a new line, put a semicolon there, and I've spelled appdb context wrong, that's why it's complaining. Appdb context, that's better. And yeah, let's get on with the body of our endpoint. So the first thing I want to do, and you've seen this already, is I want to check to see that the subscription ID that has been passed through is actually a valid subscription. We don't want, well, yeah, if someone's giving us some random number that doesn't relate to anything, then we don't want to really do anything too much with that. So we'll await on our context, this time on subscriptions. We'll use the any async again, and we'll pass in a little expression that says S goes to S, where SID is the equivalent to the ID that's passed in. And this will return true if there are any subscriptions with that ID. But if not, if it's false, then we will just return results not found. And we can say option not found. Now obviously, just a point here, there is no security here. You know, anybody can come along and put any ID in and pull messages for some other subscriber, do you know what I mean? So if you were wanting to take this and make it a bit more production quality, then you definitely want to add in some kind of authentication here. We are not doing that today though. I might make a video on that a bit later, and that might be quite interesting. So just tidy up the code. Cool. Next, we want to actually return the messages. So assuming we have a valid subscription, we want to actually see if there are any messages waiting for us. So I'm going to create a new variable called messages, and I'm going to make that equal to context, messages, where clause, and we'll say where M goes to M. And we're looking for the subscription ID is equivalent to the ID that was passed in, but also whether the status of the messages or the message in question does not equal sent. Okay, so we're using a bit of a magic string here, but we do not want to give messages that we know have already been sent to that subscriber. Okay, we only want to send messages that are new or have only been acknowledged. Okay, so yeah, that's what this clause is basically doing. Okay, and we'll say if messages count is equivalent to 0, then there are no new messages to give to that particular subscriber. So we'll say results not found. Oh, content not found. Oh, for goodness sake, not found. I'll just say no new messages. All right, perfect. Assuming we do have some messages for our subscriber, then we want to basically provide them back to it, but we do want to update the status. And I'm just seeing that there is no semicolon here. That's why I was getting some weird formatting there. Okay, perfect. All right, yeah, so as I was saying, if we do have some messages, if the count is greater than 0, then we do want to provide those back, but we're going to first loop round each of them. So we'll use a for each loop, create a variable, call it MSG in our collection of messages. And what we want to do is we'll set the message, status equal to requested. Okay, so at this point, they have requested it for us. We are going to give it back to them, but all we can say is that they've been requested from us. We do not know, and that is when I say we, I mean the broker. The broker does not know that they've been accepted or retrieved successfully. So all we can say is that they have been requested from us, okay? And that's looking pretty good. And then finally, we just want to return them back. So we'll say return results, okay, with our messages, like that. Looking pretty good to me. So let's get our command prompt up. I'm going to clear the screen. I'm going to do a .NET build. Although running it builds it, I just like to do it separately sometimes when I want to make sure we'll not get any errors. Looking pretty good. So yeah, .NET runtime. .NET ru, .NET run. Okay, cool. So what we want to do is we want to simulate a subscriber. So let's bring our best friend Insomnia back onto the screen. And we're going to create a new get endpoint. So I'm going to duplicate this one. Oh, I don't know why I did that. Let's try that again. Duplicate. And we're going to say get subscriber messages. Perfect. And our route is going to be API subscriptions. And we need to pass over a subscription ID. So we don't actually have an endpoint that returns all subscriptions, but we do have our handy DBeaver. So here we are. Here's our subscriptions table. And here is our subscription ID. So we can either use 1 or 2. Okay, so I'm going to connect in as subscriber number 2. And so what that should do, if it's successful, of course, is when we rerun this query, we should see the status for this message here should be in the requested state, whereas the message for subscriber number 1 has not yet contacted us. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. In fact, let's just put in, first of all, let's put in a stupid subscription. We get 404 not found, that's good. Nobody returned for the response. That doesn't look quite right. Let me just double check that because I thought we passed back. I'm thinking we should be passing back this subscription not found. So let me just double check this is looking correct. So we're passing over, okay. I don't think I put the right route in. I think we're hitting a different route. Yeah, there we go. Don't forget to put that in. Okay, let's try that again. That's better. So we're still getting a 404, proper 404 this time, saying the subscription is not found. That's correct. Okay, perfect. And then what we're going to do, we are going to just get all messages for subscriber 2. So let's send that over. And there we go. We get our message. We only have one message and it's in the requested state. Looking pretty good to me. If we come back to DBeaver and just maximize this and we'll run this again, what we should see, that's interesting. It's saying it's still in the new state. What did we do wrong in our code? Let's have a look. Come back over here. I've got a suspicion I maybe didn't save it. I don't think I saved it. So there you go. There's a tip. We're actually updating the message, but we're not saving it. So again, it's the lesson of awaiting on the context and doing save changes async. There we go. That's good. But interestingly, it's an interesting use case actually, because you did see in the payload, in Insomnia that we actually got this back requested when it actually hadn't been updated in the database. So there's a bit of an interesting use case. So let's just run that back up again. And hopefully, this time, if we send this over again, we should get the same thing back. Awesome. If we can test it by actually clicking send again. Actually, that is correct because we are still expecting to get back requested messages. I was wondering if there was something wrong here. So yeah, we do have to come back to DBeaver and just make sure that requested has actually been updated. And it has this time. Okay, cool. So this message for subscriber number 2 has been requested. The status has been properly updated, but you will note, if you run it again, you still get that message back because we've not acknowledged it. All right, cool. Can get a bit confusing. When I was writing this, oh my God, I went down some rabbit holes. So that's looking pretty good. So the final endpoint that we'll create is the acknowledgement endpoint to say, yep, as a subscriber, we have got that message. And then assuming that works, when we run this again for that subscriber, we won't get any messages back. Okay, cool. So quick pause and we'll do that in the next section. All right, so the last endpoint in our message broker is going to be the acknowledgement endpoint. So I'm going to stop my server from running. I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to come back over into Program CS. And last endpoint, and we'll just say ACK messages for subscriber. All right, excellent. So it's going to be a app map post, and the endpoint that we want is going to be API/subscriptions / the ID of the subscription / messages. In fact, it's exactly the same as this. Yeah, it's just a different verb. Okay, cool. Could have just copied that, couldn't I? But anyway, that's all right. And then it's an async method where we expect an app DB context called context. We're going to expect the int ID of the subscription. And then interestingly, what we're going to pass over is an array of IDs. So when we get the messages returned to us, each of the messages has a unique individual identifier, unique ID. So upon receipt of those messages, we're going to tally up those IDs, and then we're just going to pass them back to the message broker to say, these are the IDs of the messages that we have successfully received. All right, so in order to do that, I'm just going to pass over an array of integers called confs. All right, I was going to say confirmations, but I'm just setting myself up to fail with some bad spelling mistakes, so we'll just call it confs. Confs, short for confirmations, although it's actually harder to say than confirmations. All right. In the very same way, we're just going to actually check to make sure that the subscription ID that was passed over is in fact valid. Okay, so I'm just going to copy that code. Don't like copying code, but in this instance, I think it's okay. Fantastic. Now the other thing we're going to do a little bit of a validation here. We're going to say if the confs length is less than or equal to 0. I don't know how it could be less than 0, but we'll just say less than equal to 0. So i.e. we've not actually passed any IDs over, it's an empty array. Then we will just return results, and we'll say bad request. Okay, and we'll leave it at that. But assuming we have some array items in there, we're going to go through and we're going to update each of our messages in the back end. So we're going to begin by declaring a little counter, which we'll use a bit later. So we'll just say count equals 0, and move this up screen a little bit so you can see what we're doing. And we're going to create a for each loop, and I'll say for each int I in confs. We're going to create a message object, attempt to create a message object. So var message equals context messages, first to default. We're just going to say m goes to m, where id is the equivalent to I. Okay, and then we'll just check to see if the message actually exists, because it could be conceivable that some bad actor just passes over a bunch of junk IDs. So let's just say if message is not null, then we have a match, we have a hit, and we're just going to update it. So we'll say message status equals sent. And then don't forget, like I did last time, to save it off. Context, save changes async. Very important. And we will increment our counter. Counter. Oh. Count plus plus, like that. Okay, perfect. And in fact, what we could do is we could actually just take this out here rather than doing a save every time. Actually, let's leave it in. I was going to take out the for each loop, but we'll just leave it there, it's fine. And then we will return results. Okay. And we'll use string interpolation here. And the whole reason I was using a counter was just to say acknowledge. Oh gosh. My spelling is not that great. I think that's correct, acknowledged. You know what I mean anyway. And we'll say count over confirmations or confs length, okay? So basically what we're just saying is, yeah, you passed us 5 IDs and we successfully updated 4 of the 5, just so we have some kind of, you know, I don't know, something that they can work with if they so choose to. And that's basically it, okay? So let's just save that off. Whoop. Perfect, all right, so command prompt back up again. Let's do a .NET run. Looks good to me, and let's bring Insomnia back onto the screen here and pull it over onto screen, maximize this, and we're going to duplicate this, I think. And we'll call it and say, oh, okay, we'll just say acknowledge subscriber messages. All right, perfect. And it's going to be a post request this time. It's going to be the same route. So again, we're going to acknowledge all messages on subscription number 2. In the body, we're just going to make that JSON. And let's move this down. And I'm just going to provide an array of integers, basically. Now, what do we have? Let's go back to our get subscriber messages. So this, when we're talking about the IDs of the message, we're talking about this, the primary key here. All right, so theoretically, if we come back to here, if I just pass an array of 1 item, 2, let's see if that works. We're getting a 200 OK back. Let me just move this up screen. So we're saying we acknowledged 1 of 1 message. That's looking pretty good to me. So if we bring DBeaver back up and we run this again, this message here should reset to sent. Indeed it is. And more importantly, if we come here and go get subscriber messages, we shouldn't get anything. We just get a 404 not found, which makes sense. So that's looking pretty good. Probably the only other thing I want to just double check, although I think it's going to be okay. We'll just put in a weird subscription ID. That's cool. Just want to make sure that works. So basically that is our message broker done. And you've actually seen it working, to be honest with you. But I just thought to round out today's video, what we'll do in the last section is just write a very, very super simple little subscriber that you can play with. And we'll just hit our message broker to pull down its messages and acknowledge them as well, as you saw in the demo. So quick pause and we'll round out by doing our little subscriber app next. So yeah, let's get started and build a little subscriber application. So I'm just going to open a new instance of Visual Studio Code, pull that over onto the screen like this, and open up a terminal. And I'm just going to change once again into my working directory, change into my code folder. That's that, yep. And we're just going to create this here. So it's a console application, so .NET new console, and we'll just call it subscriber. So -n subscriber. And we'll change into that folder. And we'll open the project in this instance of Visual Studio Code. Excellent. We'll probably get the pop-up down here. Indeed we do. Just click yes to that. And yeah, console application, very simple, but I do love console apps. You can do a lot with them. So most of the code is going to sit within our program CS file, but the other thing we're going to do is create a DTO, because the two things this app is going to do is, number one, reach out and try and get any new messages that belong to its subscription. And as part of that, we'll get a JSON payload back. And I just simply want to deserialize that JSON payload into an object that we can work with. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a DTO. So that's what we're going to do first. And then, yes, just coming back to the main app, the second thing it's going to do is, if it does have any new messages, it's going to acknowledge those messages. And it's just going to do that continuously until we hit escape. All right, so first thing we're going to do is create a DTO. So right click, new folder, I'm going to call it DTOs. And into here, we're going to create a new file, and we're just going to call it message read DTO.cs. Excellent. Namespace of subscriber.dtos, and it's just going to be a public class. Now I'm going to cheat slightly. Well, it's not really cheating, it's being efficient, let's call it that. So I'm just going to bring the Message Broker app back onto screen here, and I have the message model selected. Now for the most part, our DTO is going to kind of look a little bit like this. So I'm just going to copy this here. I'm going to take a couple of things out. I'm going to rejig it slightly. Why can't I copy that? Maybe I just do Control C. That was weird. This copy was there and I just wasn't seeing it. Let's paste that in like so. So I'll just rename the class to message read DTO. That's cool. I'm going to take out the annotations because I don't really need those today. And that's cool. So this, again, this is the payload object that's going to come back from our API. So yeah, I do want the ID. I do obviously want the topic message. I'm not going to bother with the subscription ID because we know what the subscription ID is already, as we're going to be using it to grab our messages. We do want the expires after date, but I'm going to take this out. And we do want the message status, but I'm going to take this out. We don't want to set the value of that. And yeah, we'll just say that this can be nullable. All right, okay, so that's really our message read DTO. And again, the whole point of DTOs is that you can reshape your models, basically. As you saw that I took out attributes that were in the model that I don't want to expose as part of the payload coming back. Well, I don't want to read as part of the payload coming back. It's still being exposed, I think, in our API or in our message broker. So let's just save that off. Let's just save that off. Excellent. And so yeah, now we're going to move on to the main part of the code. And the first thing we're going to do is write our little function that's going to reach out to our message broker and return our messages if there aren't any. So let's get started with that. So yes, the first routine we're going to write is the get messages routine. So I'll take a couple of new lines. So it's static, async. And what's going to return is actually a list of the IDs of any messages that it returns. That's what it's actually going to return. And inside the method, we're just going to write out the messages if we have any. Okay, but it's actually going to return, yeah, as I say, an array or a list of the IDs that we have of each message. And we will use that with our acknowledgement method that we'll write just after this one. So it's an asynchronous method. It's a task basically that we're returning, and it's a list of integers. And we're going to call it get messages async. Okay, and if you're ever creating an asynchronous method of your own, then you really should name it in this way with the trailing async keyword there. There's no functional impact, but it's just good practice. So we're going to pass in a HTTP client. We'll call it HTTP client. And yeah, just another point of note, the way we're going to actually create that HTTP client isn't very sophisticated. We're literally just newing up an object. We're not using like the HTTP client factory, which is the way I would usually recommend you do it. But today's video, we're going to keep it very simple. All right, so internally, we're going to create a list of integers that we will attempt to populate. And we'll just call that ACK-IDs. And that's just equal to a new list of integers like that. And we are also going to create another list for any messages that we actually get. So message read DTO. Don't believe it will know what that is, but let's just keep typing for the moment. We'll just call that new messages. It doesn't, so let's bring that in. Control period to bring in subscriber DTOs. And that's just equal to new list of message read DTOs, like that. And then quite simply, we're going to reach out to the message broker. I'm going to put this in a try catch block because, you know, we could get all sorts of weird exceptions theoretically if we're trying to contact a third party system. And we're going to try and populate our new messages list of messages, okay, like this. So wait, and we'll use a HTTP client. And the method we're going to use on it is a kind of extension method called get from JSON async. And I really like this method because it wraps up a number of things that you'd usually do sort of step by step. So if you weren't using this method, you'd have to go and get your object, deserialize it, and these are separate steps. This does it all in one thing. It makes a GET request, and it also then deserializes into the object type that you want. Okay, but we do need to bring in the namespace for this method. But into this, we're going to specify the type that we're deserializing to, and that is just a list of message read DTOs, like such. And then in here, we actually place the destination URL. Okay, but before we do that, I'm just going to bring in this extension method. So you can see here, we need to bring in using system.net HTTP JSON, like so, okay? And we need to put something in here, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come over to Insomnia, and we are going to be basically making this call here, get subscriber messages, okay? So I'm just going to repurpose this one here. All right, so copy that and paste that in here. Now, I do appreciate that we've got a hard-coded ID in here, which is not something you would typically want to do. So I'll maybe leave that for you as a bit of homework to actually make this a bit more of a dynamic value. This is complaining. It's just saying about nullability. Okay, my favorite subject. So let's just fix that up because I find those quite annoying, these messages. So just put a question mark here. That should get rid of that. Okay, cool. And then we'll just do our catch block. And quite simply, we're just going to return our list of IDs, which is basically an empty set. So ACK IDs. Okay, so we have no messages. Something's gone wrong. Yeah, we'll just return that back. But assuming it was successful, and you know, at this point, let's assume it was successful, we could have no messages at this point. That would still be a successful call. So this catch is really just catching something that's maybe not gone to plan. So we're then going to have a for each loop, and into the for each loop, we're going to say for each message, read DTO, we'll call it MSG, in our messages or new messages. And again, there may be none. And again, we're getting that nullability thing. Let's just put a bang in there. And yeah, what we're going to do, well, let's write out our payload for each message so we can just see it on screen. Now, obviously, you would want to do something else here. You know, if you're actually doing something meaningful, you want to take those messages and, you know, do some kind of processing or something like that. We're just going to write out to the screen, keep it very simple. We're going to use string interpolation, so let's print out the message ID. Let's print out the message, the actual message itself, and we'll also print out the status, just so you can see what that will look like, message status. All right, perfect. Put a semicolon in there. Now, more importantly, what we actually want to do is populate our list of acknowledgement IDs with the IDs, okay? Because that's what we're wanting to return, and that's what we will use to actually send back our acknowledgement. Okay, let's put a semicolon in there. And I can see I've got an error here, like that. Okay, cool, that looks pretty good. That's all we need to do there. And then really, we just want to return our ACK IDs again. That's basically it. Okay, so this theoretically could, again, contain nothing. So again, if new messages was just an empty set, there are no new messages, then we're not going to get anything written to screen, and this will just return back, yeah, an empty list, basically. Let's see what this is warning. Okay, the function is declared but never used. That's okay. All right, so let's just save that off. We can't really test this at the moment, but we maybe do a .NET build just to make sure we've not introduced any new errors. That's looking okay. We're just getting that warning about this method not being used. All right, cool. So what we're going to do is, well, not what maybe we're going to do, what we're going to do next is move on to the second method in our subscriber, and that is to, assuming we have got some new messages, actually acknowledge them and make sure we don't get them resent back down to the subscriber. So we'll do that next. So yeah, let's do our last method. Again, it's a static method and it's async as well. It's just going to return a task and we're going to call it ack messages async, like so. Let me just move this up the screen a bit so it's a bit more centered. And it once again is going to expect a HTTP client. We'll call it HTTP client, and it's also going to expect our list of acknowledgement IDs, okay, which is just a list of integers, and we'll call that ack IDs. Let's keep it consistent like that. Okay, cool. So again, we're going to reach out to the broker. We're going to create a response object, and we're going to await on our HTTP client. And this time we're going to do a post as JSON async. So it's kind of the sister operation to get from JSON async. It's kind of doing a couple of things at once. So let's do that. And again, what we're going to do is come over to Insomnia and we're just going to paste in the URL for that particular method here, which is this one here. And again, we've got a hard-coded subscription ID, which again, you wouldn't usually do, but again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to do that. So paste that in and we will terminate it with a semicolon. And then we're just going to see if we have a message back from the broker. So we'll say return message equals response. And we are going to await on that actually. We're going to use an asynchronous method on the response. So content, not console. And we'll just read as string async. Okay, and this is complaining. Ah, I know why, because we are not passing in our model. Okay, so it's a post operation, so you typically would expect to be passing some kind of model over. In that case, that's just our acknowledgement IDs, like this. Okay, so it needs something to work with. All right, which is just an array of IDs. Otherwise, that's looking pretty good. And yeah, we'll just write out a return message. Okay. And again, we've got a warning here. That's probably just going to be saying that the function is not being used. All right, perfect. So let's just save that off. And so what we're going to do now is actually, make use of these two functions. So we're going to do that next. Let me just put these up to the top. It's a bit annoying. And so up here, we're going to actually write a little routine that's just going to continuously loop, continuously poll our message broker for any new messages. So yeah, do that next. So I'm going to start by doing a console write line, and I'm just going to say press escape to stop. Okay, so otherwise it's going to loop round until we press the escape key. So how are we going to do that? I'm going to use a do while loop, which is, I don't know about you, but it's probably the least used of my looping endeavors. So do while, let's say console read key, it's true, access the key, and it's not equal to console key, and we'll say escape. That, okay, so do stuff while we have not pressed the escape key. So we'll create a new HTTP client. We'll just call it client, and that's just new HTTP client like that. And again, this is not the way I would usually create a HTTP client. There are better ways of doing it, specifically using HTTP client factory, but in the interest of time again, we'll do it like this. And I'm just going to write out that we're listening. Okay, so now we're actually sort of doing something, and then we're going to enter into another while loop actually. And we're going to say while console, well, not console key available. Okay, so we're just going to keep looping around. So inside the loop, list of integers, call it ack IDs. is going to be equal, and we're going to make our call to our first method, which is get messages async, and we'll pass in the HTTP client. Okay, so again, assuming this method is successfully returned something, this was either going to return a list of IDs that we need to acknowledge, or it's going to contain nothing. Okay, so if it contains nothing, then we don't really want to do anything. But before we do anything, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to sleep this method, or sleep this loop for 2 seconds, okay? And that's really just to kind of slow this polling mechanism down, okay? So if you didn't do this, it would just be absolutely going crazy. We don't want to do that, so you want to kind of poll it intermittently. So I'm just going to slow it down for 2 seconds. So the 2000 is milliseconds, which equates to 2 seconds. And then I'm just going to say if our ACK-IDs count is greater than 0, so we actually have something in there, it means we've got something to acknowledge, then we simply want to await on our second method, which is the acknowledgement. Okay, client and ACK-IDs. And it's looking pretty good, so we'll save that off, bring up the console, we'll do a .NET build again. That should all be looking pretty good. Okay, so maybe take a quick pause here before we run up and actually start testing to see whether our subscriber works. I'm very positive that it will, but we'll do that in the next section. So we're going to test everything kind of end to end. And just before we do that, I did have a little bit of a spring clean of our data in the broker. So I'm just going to bring DBeaver onto the screen. And as you can see there, I actually deleted all the messages from the broker that were existing. So if I just actually do that again, select everything from messages and run that, you'll see that we have no messages in our broker now. And just to remind us what we have by way of topics, let's just refresh ourselves because it's been a while since we've done this. Select everything from topics. Let's run that. We created 2 topics, one called orders with an ID of 3 and one called shipment. So we're really, for the most part, our subscriptions are going to be working with this orders topic. And again, just coming back to our subscriptions, let's just have a look at our subscriptions because that's really what we're working with. And I think we'd hard-coded the value of 2, didn't we? Yeah, so this subscriber is basically the warehouse subscriber. Okay, that's the name of this subscription. So ID of 2, and the topic that it is interested in is topic 3, which again is our order. Okay, so that's just a reminder of where we're at, and I did clear out all the messages that we've got. Okay, so move this back off to the screen. Our message broker app is running, so I've just started that up, so it's running over here. So if we start this up now, let's see what we get. Hopefully there's no errors. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So it's just listening. Press the escape key to stop, so let's just press escape. That's looking good, so that's working as we expect. So .NET run again, and it's just listening, and it's not getting anything because there are no messages. So let's bring Insomnia back onto the screen, and we're going to publish a message. And I might attempt to just kind of, that's going to look pretty horrible, but that's okay. We are going to publish a message, okay? So we're going to publish a message on to topic 3, which is the orders topic, okay? So if we send that over, there we go, we get our message popped down, and then we get a second little message saying that we've actually acknowledged that message. So by virtue of the fact that we're not getting it, boom, you know, continually bringing that message back, I'm fairly confident that's working okay. If we just blast a few in, you can see the 4 come down, and then it acknowledges 4 messages, and it then gets the 5th message and it acknowledges that as well. Excellent, so that's looking pretty good. This is basically just what you saw in the demo, to be honest with you. And if we come back over to DBeaver, if we have a look at the messages that is in our, or that are in our backend, you can see that we have these sent messages for subscription 2. So everything for subscription 2 has been sent, and then poor old subscription 1, because we did have a second subscription, they're just still sitting there. So we need to run up a second instance of a subscriber with a subscription ID of 1, and that would then pull down the messages. And as I say, you know, we could definitely extend this to kind of actually have a routine to clear out any messages that are, you know, actually sent as well. You might want to get rid of those, as well as any new messages that had expired. So hopefully you enjoyed the video and you know a bit more about the publisher subscriber pattern, and hopefully you may adopt that particular pattern in some of your solutions going forward. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you've not done so already, maybe think about subscribing to the channel. If you liked the video, give it a like. But until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you again very soon.